Our next presenter is Lizette Cloete. And I am so excited about her being here with us today. This is the first time she's part of our conference. I met her a few months back. I just love everything that she's doing.
How are you, Miss Linda?
Joyful and grateful.
Always, every day.
Yes,
You can see my screen with the slides, right?
got it.
Okay. Do you see the second screen with my cheat sheets, or do you
No,
just see the slides? Okay.
just slides.
I
Okay,
just need to make sure.
okay, I'm gonna back out so you can get started. I will monitor the chat room if there are any questions and take it away, my friend.
All right. So thank you for having me here, Linda. I'm super excited to be here. And we are going to go very quick because an hour is never enough time. So the first thing, if I can get my slides to move, is who is this presentation for? So this presentation is for you if you are a family caregiver of somebody living with dementia and you are stressed, kind of feeling like you are juggling a whole bunch of balls up in the air like my juggler friend over there. It is also for you if you are feeling very overwhelmed, kind of like you are in quicksand and not quite sure where to go and how to get out of the quicksand. It is also for you if you are feeling exhausted, like you're burning the candle at both ends. Now, my presentations are the wrong way, going the wrong way, or a little unique and different because I'm unique and different. So what are you going to get today? You are going to gain clarity, kind of like putting on a pair of glasses. I have my glasses, my readers here somewhere, to help you gain a little bit more clarity related to dementia caregiving, and the role of coaching through this process. It is also to help you feel empowered, kind of like putting on a shield of armor. You know, when you are a knight and you have your armor on, you're feeling a lot more confident and empowered about your journey and your battles, correct? And we're also going to be looking to giving you some relief. I want you to picture being in a desert. I'm from South Africa, so we have a lot of deserts there, and like an oasis. So I want you to think about today's presentation as being a little bit of an oasis. So let's talk a little bit about coaching. Coaching is a necessary pathway to help alleviate dementia caregivers' stress. I want you to think about coaching as being like if you were in a maze and you're taking all these turns and twists and you keep running into a wall, and it's very difficult to see the pathway that you're supposed to take because you cannot see the big picture. Coaching is kind of like looking at the maze from above and giving you a direction. An hour is never enough time. So at the end of this or throughout the presentation, I'm going to give you some ways for you to be able to actually connect with you again later on, should I resonate with you. And so I really just want you to have some tools to help you in this journey. But I have a really, really big favor to ask you today. I want you to promise me something, not for me, but for you. Coming to a conference, going through a 3-day conference like this, and not actually taking action on the information that you get is really not helpful to any of us. So I'm asking you today, from something that you learn in my presentation or other people's presentation, to take action on the information. So take one nugget of information that you've learned today and take action, kind of like skipping stones. If you don't actually throw the stone, it won't actually skip over the water.
Amen.
Here is a gift for you guys today. I developed this specifically, or I put this together for you so that you could get a little bit of an idea of what your own personal stress levels are specifically related to caregiving. This is not a scorecard related to, I'm stressed. This is actually a standardized assessment that you can take that will tell you exactly which bucket, because there are actually 5 different buckets of stress that people experience when they are family caregivers. So I'm asking you to either use the QR code or write down the URL and go take this stress assessment, because that way you can see exactly where you are related to burning out. I know some of the other topics are talking about stress and burnout, but there is science behind this, and I want to give you guys a tool to help you.
I love that, Lizette. I love that.
Perfect. Did you guys know that every 65 seconds in the United States, somebody is being diagnosed with dementia? Now, that QR code will take you to the Alzheimer's disease fact and figure report from the Alzheimer's Association, but every 65 seconds in the United States. So we know that dementia and dementia caregiving gives us a lot of challenges. Would you guys agree? There are a lot of challenges related to dementia and dementia caregiving. One of the big things is that we feel misunderstood, right? It's kind of like looking in when we've gone to a fun house, we're standing in the mirror and everything is distorted. Well, the healthcare system and navigating dementia can feel extremely overwhelming. It can feel very distorted and totally change your view of the process and what you are experiencing. So I'm wanting you, I know that this is a challenge because there is so much information out there, and sometimes it is very, very easy to feel misunderstood. How many of you guys feel misunderstood? I know when I started this journey, I did. Another challenge is it's very exhausting. I want you to imagine being a plant that hasn't been watered, right? Because we don't take care of ourselves. We get depleted, we get exhausted, we put everybody else in front of us instead of looking at ourselves and what we need in this process. So that's another challenge. Another challenge we experience is we feel very unsure. I don't know about you guys. I don't like heights. So I would not walk over that bridge particularly myself, but it can make you feel very unsure because it feels very rickety. We don't know whether we're making the right decisions. We're making decisions with and for other people, and it can make us feel extremely unsure of ourselves. And then I know for a fact that a lot of people who are family caregivers of people living with dementia feel a tremendous sense of loss of autonomy, loss of relationships, loss of time. There's a lot of sense of loss, and that is tremendous challenge related to dementia and dementia caregiving. Kind of like somebody who has been through a natural disaster or like a flood or whatever. And those are normal, natural feelings, guys, and we do need to acknowledge them. But at the same time, I want us to look at some opportunities, right? What can be opportunities? Whenever I do a presentation like this, I always talk about opportunities, and people are like, what? What do you mean there are opportunities in dementia and dementia caregiving? Well, that is what I'm trying to do. Is I want to change the narrative. I want people to look for some of the opportunities. So what are some opportunities? Well, we can feel understood. We can find a clear path to navigate dementia and dementia caregiving so that we feel understood, kind of like when we have a reflection in water, when there is no wind or anything moving, you can see clearly through your reflection in the water, right? So another opportunity that we have is we can create support. We can find a way to find support and be supported. I know so many people struggling with dementia and dementia caregiving specifically feel isolated, and because it is a very isolating process, and they wait too long to put support in place. But when you have the right support, and yet again, that won't be me because I'm afraid of heights, but when you are climbing a mountain, when you are doing those kinds of things, and you wouldn't climb that mountain without the right support, without the ropes, without the structures in place to assist you. And you need to know how to use your gear or else it doesn't help. So we're talking about, I want you to see the opportunity of creating the right support for yourselves. Oops, and yet again, the wrong way. And then another opportunity is becoming resilient. Now, I don't know if you guys have listened to me ever or if you know anything about me, but I have a whole bunch of backyard chickens. And like, how on earth are you going to get from resilient to backyard chickens, Lizette? Well, here's the thing. I don't know if you guys know, but chickens are extremely resilient. I have seen my chickens be caught by hawks and survive. I've seen them get infections and we think they're going to die and they survive. They are extremely, extremely resilient. And when we cultivate a sense of resilience as a caregiver, it is a tremendous opportunity. And then I want you to look for the hope in the situation. I'm a Christian, so everything that I do, I answer from a biblical perspective. But the hope of the gospel is that, we have hope and we do not need to feel hopeless. And I love that picture that was, I was on a cruise, a dementia supported cruise where we took 9 people living with dementia and their families on a cruise. It was the best experience I've ever had. Totally reframed how I think about caregiving and traveling as a person living with dementia. So I encourage you to continue to travel. So where did my journey start? Well, my journey started as a family caregiver about 2 years ago, a little over 2 years ago, when I was sitting at my desk and my phone rang and I looked at my phone and I'm like, oh, great, this is the hospital. Because, you can see sometimes the exchanges on the phone. The hospital systems often have similar exchanges. And I knew that it was about my dad. You see, my dad had been in the hospital. He got super sick. This is at the tail end of COVID. And even though I knew somewhere in my anatomy that I was a family caregiver, I didn't really know that I was a family caregiver yet. My mom had had a massive aneurysm at 42, and she is aging with vascular dementia. And my dad was in the hospital, and my husband and I tumbled into becoming 24-hour caregivers. And it was extremely stressful for me, and it was extremely difficult. But one of the things that I actually learned through that process was that I do have a huge measure of control over how I respond to the situation. And I really sat there and I looked and, I was overwhelmed and I didn't want to be a family caregiver. I was, like, I call it a reluctant family caregiver. I knew a lot, but I didn't recognize I was going to be a caregiver. And so it really threw me into this caregiving journey. But what happened was, I will never forget, as things started to unfold, I was that juggler, right? Putting one fire out, doing this, burning the candle at both ends, until I actually made a decision, an active decision to become a family caregiver and to then actually become the best family caregiver that I could be. It changed my whole view, my whole relationship with just looking at the whole problem. And one of the things that I reflected on at that time was, as an occupational therapist for 31 years, I started to look back and I'm like, successful caregiver, not successful caregiver, successful caregiver, not successful caregiver. What is the difference? And one of the big things that I concluded was that the successful caregiver acknowledged that they're a caregiver and they started to actually make plans. They actually took action. They started to work the problem instead of waiting for things to change. So dementia coaching is one of the most effective ways you can decrease your stress as a caregiver. I want you to think about coaching, because coaching isn't something that a lot of people think about, but kind of like a lighthouse, right? It shows you the way, it shows you the direction, it gives you where you need to go. If you were lost in the ocean on a sailboat and you saw that lighthouse, you need to move towards the lighthouse. So where do caregivers get their support? So one of the things I want you to consider is that support can kind of be like an air traffic controller that gives you different support from different directions related to, when the pilots are trying to land the plane. If there's not some system, if there's not some support system telling them which way to go, they're going to have some difficulty in landing the plane. Would you not agree? I definitely want the air traffic controllers to be there. So where do caregivers get their support? So I developed this little caregiver support framework, and I'm on a little flight path here. But the first place people get support is what I call at the gate. So at the bottom, you'll see information. Information's going from general information to more specific information. And then on the y-axis, you'll see solutions to dementia's problem, right? General solutions to all the way to very individualized solutions. So when we're at the gate, I want you to consider or think about that as things like local support groups. You have to travel. The information can be more specific to you and your problems, but it is more generalized solutions. The information can be specific, but the solutions are not necessarily specific. And it is very dependent on the facilitator. Support groups are absolutely valuable, and I want people to go to support groups, but I want to show you where all the different types of support lies so that you can know where you need to try to get your support. So one is at the gate. The second one is what I call flying coach. So here we're starting to get a little bit more specific, maybe solutions, but the information might be a little bit more general. These can be things like free Facebook groups. These can be free summits, this conference, lower cost memberships. There are a lot of places where we get some additional information, but the information cannot be very specific to us necessarily, and we still have to weed through it, which takes a lot of time and a lot of effort when we're already struggling. And these are very valuable, but there has to be a strong level of discernment on the person who is joining these like Facebook groups and things like that, because not all groups are created equal. And so I just, I want you to think about that as you're looking at where to receive your support. The third one is what I call flying on standby, right? So here we're not even on the plane, right? We're not even on the gangway. Here I'll never forget this. I went to church one day and I met a lady that I've known for, just an acquaintance, but somebody I know, and I know exactly who they are. And she mentioned that her dad has dementia. And I'm like, well, where do you find your information? Where are you getting your support from? And my jaw dropped. Like, I couldn't believe what she told me. And she's like, yeah, I'm watching reels. I'm watching TikToks. I'm like, TikTok? You're getting your specific information related to how to solve a very complex problem on TikTok. And I don't necessarily think that TikTok is bad. I don't think reels are bad. I put out reels. I definitely have a TikTok channel. All of these things are great, but they're 30-second snippets of information. You cannot get the level and the depth of information that you need. It can be fun and entertaining at times, but it's kind of like drinking from a fire hydrant, right? So I want you to ask yourself today, as you're listening to me, which one of these are you guys in? Which of these quadrants are you in? And then ask yourself, how does that make you feel? And does that, are you getting the support that you feel like you need? So which one of those three quadrants are you in? The last quadrant is what I call flying first class, right? So this is where we have very specific information and very individualized solutions. So what kind of things fall into this category? Well, one-on-one consultation, one-on-one skilled therapy, even though I do believe that skilled therapy comes with pros and cons, specifically related to dementia, because I am an occupational therapist. I've been one for 31 years. I love my my colleagues, but not all therapists are dementia specialists. And I have seen so many people over the years. Like I have a client who had physical therapy, and I asked them, what kind of things they had done, and all they focused on was the physical components, because that particular person, even though the family member had dementia, they are not dementia specialists necessarily. Some may be, some may not be, but one-on-one skilled therapy definitely falls into the first class category. One-on-one coaching, one-on-one consulting, but also group coaching. And group coaching is different than, say, a membership. And the reason for that is the level of support that people get. When we do group coaching, there's small group cohorts. The people in the group can actually communicate with me, and we solve their specific problems. So I want you to know that when you feel supported, it is the best way that you can decrease your caregiver burden and stress today. It's kind of like trying to jump out of an airplane, which, yet again, I don't like heights, so I'm not going to do it. But if you jump out of a plane and you don't have a parachute, you definitely have a problem. And so I want you to be encouraged that if you find the right support and you put the right structures around yourself, that you actually can manage this complex journey in a lot more supported and easier manner. So did you guys know, and Linda, did you know that 65% of families are actually wanting to keep a person living with dementia at home?
Yeah, most definitely.
Yeah. And so that is, when I think about it, a lot of people are not aware of it, but most people are actually trying to keep people at home. All we oftentimes hear is people needing to place somebody in a facility, but most people are trying to keep their person living with dementia at home.
Yes.
So we are going to look today at 4 mistakes that waste your caregiving energy every single day. Because I don't know about you guys, but I don't have a lot of time and energy on my hands. So making these mistakes that waste my time and energy every single day can be very, very challenging, right? So the first mistake we're going to talk about today that I see, and this is my big platform that I'm standing on right now, is that too many people are making the mistake of believing that dementia caregiving cannot be easier. That is why I'm so grateful to Linda and her program and her platform and the opportunity to speak at this conference, because as long as we don't change that mind shift, if we don't start to make these changes in how we think about it, it is always going to be a struggle. It's kind of like if you're trying to go sailing, and I'm not a sailor, but if you sail trying to go up against the wind, it is hard. You struggle to make progress. And because you're not using the tools that you have at your disposal, by actually changing your sail, it feels extremely difficult. But the moment that you change that belief that dementia caregiving can be easier, it can significantly improve your life. My story started with this. My story related to starting this coaching business actually started with me joining huge, big Facebook groups. I never knew that there were 40, 50, 60,000 people, huge, big Facebook groups. And most family caregivers I know, they go into these huge Facebook groups. And even though these Facebook groups have a place, and I'm not dissing Facebook groups, I don't want you to hear that at all. I have a free Facebook group. But what I noticed in these very, very large Facebook groups is that people felt extremely anonymous, And because they are struggling on a day-to-day basis, a lot of people go into these Facebook groups, and this is their safe space where they can just say whatever they want related to their struggles. And I recognize that people are struggling, and I know that. But what I think it is creating is that so many people who are new family caregivers come into these Facebook groups, and all they see is this negative narrative, horrible, oh, woe is me, and it's
I totally agree.
and what we have to do in order to make this journey easier, Linda, is we have to change that narrative. Yes, it is hard, but death is hard. Death sucks. It doesn't matter who you are when you pass away, the people you leave behind you are hurting. So Facebook groups play a role, but I noticed that they weren't getting a lot of reliable information necessarily, and it is toxic. And so I encourage people to be very selective about going into these groups, because it's kind of like a toxic wasteland. What you take into your brain is what you're going to believe about this. I don't know about you guys, but if you think about having to clean water from toxic waste, how much time and effort and everything that you have to put into trying to clear up your mind. There's a reason why we shouldn't watch, like the news right before going to bed, right? Because that stuff's filling your head. Well, what I'm experiencing, what I find is that these Facebook groups are doing the same thing, and the narrative over and over and over is, this is hard, this is hard, this is hard. So as long as you are believing that, it is going to be difficult. There's nothing that's going to change it, because that's what you're filling your mind with. So let me tell you about Angela. Angela is one of my community members that I've been working with for almost a year now. And one of the things that I did is I take my group coaching people off of Facebook. It's still in a group container. It still has the same feel as a Facebook group, but it is curated, and people can ask questions, kind of like Facebook. But I can control the narrative that people are hearing, and I'll let people express their frustration, but then very quickly we're looking for solutions. And one of the things that Angela really struggled with when she came to me was feeling extremely stressed. And recently she told me her stress levels went from a 10 out of a 10 to a 3 out of a 10 just by being a part of a group coaching program. And so this is my happy space. Patch Adams, I don't know if you guys know this, but Patch Adams was played by Robin Williams, and Robin Williams was diagnosed with dementia, Lewy body dementia, after he passed away. And so I just love Patch Adams. If you haven't seen the movie, you need to watch the movie. But this is a quote: "The most radical act anybody can commit to is to being happy." So my challenge for you guys today is to try to be happy. So on a scale of 1 to 10, with 1 being I totally do not believe that dementia caregiving can be any easier, to 10, I believe it can be easier. Where do you put yourself on this? I want you to ask yourself that question, because this is for you to realize kind of where you are in your dementia caregiving journey and how our own thinking can affect our lives. The second mistake that we make is that we are relying as family caregivers on general health care and therapy for comprehensive support. So it's kind of like trying to go sailing on a boat using a map, right? Healthcare is not set up to specifically fix this problem for us. And you might be making this mistake if you feel frustrated because nothing you try related to therapy is actually working, or you leave the doctor's office with a piece of paper that says, do this, but really no real help, right? And so my journey with the whole healthcare system started with my dad when my dad was scammed. He was scammed about 3 years, actually 2 years before he was diagnosed. And when my dad got super sick, I told you guys he'd been sick. I actually was able to get into his My Chart, and I read through everything in his chart. So I'm a healthcare provider, so I read through everything. And there's a note in the chart that says, has anybody ever asked you whether, or has anybody ever told you that that you're having trouble remembering things or with your memory? And my dad answered yes. And they asked who, and it said, my daughter. And then crickets. They didn't do anything. Now, why is that frustrating to me? Because time is brain, right? We know that in a stroke. If you have a stroke, you get told, get your bottom to the hospital because your brain is dying. So 3 years before my dad was actually diagnosed with cognitive impairment, the doctor knew and did nothing. And that is super, super frustrating. And I can tell you story after story related to that. So it's kind of like thinking about dry rot or termite damage, right? So sometimes the damage is underlying. We cannot see the damage. The house looked like it's fine because all of the stuff is happening in the background underneath. Well, the reality is that the healthcare system has not been set up for us to manage dementia. I don't know whether you guys agree with me or not, but it is set up as a Band-Aid. So you go to the doctor, this is what's wrong. You tell them, oh, mom or dad or my husband's doing this, right? And then they can't really help you because it's an ever rolling stream. And then the next thing and the next thing and the next thing. And it's 6 months later before you get to see the doctor again. And you've had 20 things crop up in that 6-month period. It is not set up to provide family caregivers with the type of support that they actually need related to dementia and dementia caregiving. Let me tell you about Rachel. So Rachel is one of my clients in one of my group coaching programs, and we've been working together for about 9 months, and she had a situation where she came week in, week out, and we kind of worked through, she's supporting her mom. But what happened is one night her mom lives in independent living, and her mom got super, super confused, has a diagnosis of dementia, but is still living independently in a CCRC. And her mom got super confused, walked out of the facility with a walker. The independent living called her and said, hey, mom's outside on the street. So she showed up and she said, she was able to manage this little speed bump. She was able to talk her mom off of the ledge into the car, got her back home safely. And what she told me afterwards was, as this was happening, I heard you in my head. I knew what to do. I knew what to say. And it was a tremendous difference because before, as we had started working together, she really struggled with trying to reason with her mom, trying to give her mom, actual reasons why you shouldn't be doing what you're doing, mom, etc. So I was super proud of her because she was able to navigate this little speed bump, this little emergency, this little mini crisis with her mom because she has learned to speak dementia. So I really want you to ask yourself, where are you? Are you relying heavily on the healthcare system at a 1, or are you open to looking at other ways of actually helping and getting support for yourself? So that's the second problem. The third problem that we have, or mistake that people make, is they misunderstand the impact of our thoughts about dementia on our caregiving journey. It's kind of like when you put on tinted lenses, right? When you're looking through it in the one way, the same glass of water will look pink as opposed to just a regular tint, just a regular pair of glasses. So everything will change with whatever glasses you put on. So we misunderstand. This is a tremendous big thing for me. We misunderstand the impact our own thinking has on how we experience our dementia caregiving journey. I was in boarding school in South Africa from the age of 12 until the age of 17, and it was a horrible experience for me. I truly, truly struggled. I was overwhelmed. I cried all day, every day. But my parents were living in Sweden, and I had no choice. I had to go to boarding school. But nothing changed in my life until I started to change how I thought about my whole journey related to boarding school. That happened 20 plus years after I left boarding school. I had a lot of resentment to my parents. How could you do this to me when my kids were born? It was devastating. It really was devastating. But then one day I stood in front of the mirror and I looked at myself and I said, why are you still struggling so much with having been put in boarding school? And I asked myself this question, do you like who you are? And I said, yes. And I said, you cannot hate you cannot hate that experience, because that experience made you who you are, and you are okay with who you are. So you need to decide to let that go. And from that day on, I used to never could tell the story of being in boarding school without bawling my eyes out. But literally from that day on, I can talk about boarding school. I harbor no resentment to my parents related to putting me in boarding school, but I had to make that decision because the way I was thinking about it was impacting how I was responding to it all these 20 plus years later. And I don't want to live like that. So it's kind of like, when you decide to lose weight, right? If you decide to lose weight and you don't actually make a change in what you eat, you're going to get the same result every single time. It's kind of like that dude eating his McDonald's hamburger. I know it doesn't have the McDonald's logo on, but I'm pretty sure they were trying to go for the McDonald's feel if you look at the colors. But one of my recent clients, I've been working with her probably about 2 months now. And what I love about this particular client is she is actually an Alzheimer's Association support group facilitator, and she joined my program because she recognized that she couldn't do it by herself anymore. And the one thing that we have consistently been working on since she joined is how she thinks about this process, because she's tired. She's been through this journey for a long time now. She supported a dad, and now she's helping her mom. And every time we kind of talk this through, I'm like, let's reframe how you think about it. Let's reframe how you think about it. And just literally like Monday, she wrote this. I woke up this morning and I felt like a burden has been lifted off me. I don't know why, but I'm not going to question it. It feels great. And it's really because she started to change how she is thinking about her dementia caregiving journey. Another Patch Adams quote, we need to start treating the patient as well as the disease. On a scale of 1 to 10, where are you guys related to this particular problem of misunderstanding that our own thinking significantly impacts our journey? I want you to ask yourself that question. Are you a 1? I have no control over my thinking, or are you a 10 and recognize that when you change how you think about this, it will make your journey easy? And the fourth problem that we have, or the mistake that we make, is we waste time on ineffective techniques, right? Kind of like that squirrel. Most of us have squirrels in our backyard. They dig these holes and they put their nuts away, and then they forget where they put them, right? And then they got to go dig up your yard to go look for their nuts. And they waste significant amount of time because of not having a good strategy on where to hide their nuts, right? It's kind of like me when my dad was sick, and because I didn't want to make any changes, I worked for home health. We lived about an hour and a quarter away from my mom and dad, and so I took a job closer to them, thinking that would cut down a lot on my, that we could stay where we were. But what ended up happening is I traded a 4-day work week into a 6-day drive of 200 miles every single day, because I didn't want to make a change, because I chose to do something in an ineffective manner. What resulted was my husband and I actually sold our house and we moved so that we could support my mom and dad. But I was wasting so much time and energy using an ineffective strategy. And I really want to encourage you not to do the same thing. So it's kind of like trying to dig a hole with a spoon, right? So I want you to imagine that you're trying to dig a hole and all you're using is a spoon. So when we're using inefficient and inefficient techniques, we are trying to dig a hole with a spoon to try to solve a very complex problem. So let me tell you real quick about Alma. Alma was one of my clients before she has passed away. I worked with her daughter, Deb, for an extended period of time. And I was blessed to be able to work with them one-on-one. We lived geographically close. But Alma was really struggling with hallucinations and some agitation and a lot of behaviors. And through coaching Deb, we were able to come up with actual strategies that she could use to help her mom, because Deb wasn't recognizing how she was impacting what was actually happening. So the situation was that Alma would get super, super frustrated and agitated with Deb when Deb was helping her. And then I kind of went to their house and I kind of watched their interactions a little bit. And Deb is a wonderful, godly woman. And she was constantly saying to her mom, trying to honor her mom, well, Mom, do you want to sit here? Do you want to do this? Do you want your glasses? Do you want this book? Do you want that book? What do you want to eat? Do you want to do this? And after about the fourth, do you want to question, Alma went whoosh, and she would get really super annoyed. And so through awareness and through teaching her different strategies and different techniques, Deb was able to totally change the way she was communicating with Alma, and that behavior went away. And so, knowing the right techniques, knowing the right way of actually communicating and problem solving this will put you in a position of strength. Did you guys know, and Linda, did you know that only 4 behavioral or psychological signs and symptoms of dementia is the tipping point for family caregivers? 4. That is when a family ends up placing somebody in a facility. So what does that look like? Things like hallucinating, incontinence, walking, wandering, shadowing, sundowning, any combination of these 4 difficult behaviors, challenging behaviors, is the tipping point for a family. My goal is to keep people significantly under that 4, because then they still have the bandwidth in order to keep somebody at home. So if we focus on the problem, you will never see the solution, never focus on the problem. It's kind of like trying to drive that car who's just driven through the mud, right? If you're looking at the mud, you're not looking at where you're going. And so dementia coaching helps people to actually focus on the solution instead of looking at the problem. The problem is dementia. And I get it can feel very, very challenging. But if we only look at what we're facing, we're not looking for the solutions. And I'm encouraging people to try to look for the solutions. So on a scale of 1 to 10, where are you guys? Are you willing to look for alternative solutions? Are you able to try to look at finding an easier way to do the right techniques instead of spinning your wheels? So to recap, the 4 mistakes we make is, number 1, believing that dementia caregiving cannot be easier. That is a significant error that we are making. A lot of us are making, not everybody. The second mistake is that we are relying on general healthcare and therapy for comprehensive support for the family caregivers. I'm not talking about just the person with dementia. I'm talking about the me and the you in the room. The third error we make is not understanding or misunderstanding the impact our own thoughts about dementia have on our journey. And that is a big thing for me. The way we think is the way we go, and we do not realize how powerful our thoughts are. Most of us, if I really sat down and spoke to people about that, they would be able to probably recognize it, but an hour is not a lot of time. So The fourth one is wasting time on ineffective techniques, and kind of just like being like that squirrel and just trying one thing here, trying one thing there. All right, so I'd like to know from people what has been the most valuable for them so far.
Lizette, I have a question.
Yes.
Somebody has asked, where is the place or person that I can get support between understanding dementia experience versus end of life? Is my mom in severe dementia mood, or is that her end of life processing experience? I am experiencing push and pull experiences with my mom's words she shares.
Okay, so that is a great question. So the way I would have to unpack that is, I don't really have a full feeling related to where this particular person is, but I'll explain it in how I work with people, because that's the only way that I know what to do, right? So when people join, or when I start to work with people, the very first place I start is with their stress levels, them as the caregiver. We have to start with the caregiver. If we start with the person living with dementia, we start in the wrong spot. As a healthcare provider, the focus is on patient. As a coach, the focus is on caregiver. It's caregiver-centered dementia care. So I start with where that particular person is with their stress levels. But the second part of it is then I really work on looking at where that particular person living with dementia is functioning. So we really try to figure out where in the scope of their journey are they? Because in order for me to answer that question, I would answer the question very differently if the person is diagnosed with mild cognitive impairment and they're at the start of their journey. Well, that looks very different to, the struggles that a person is having at that stage looks vastly different to, well, is this dementia related behavior towards the latter part of a journey, or is this, somebody's misbehavior because they're,
Yeah, well, she says her mom was in a community, but she couldn't stay there any longer. She needed to go into a nursing home, so instead she took her home.
Okay.
Under hospice care.
Okay, so it sounds like she's a little bit further on in her journey. So can you ask the question again, Linda?
She wants to understand, she wants to talk to somebody to try to get the idea, is her mom's behavior right now just because of the dementia, or is it because she's facing end of life?
Okay, then I will give her an opportunity here in a second. I do have the ability for people to schedule a call, and I could very, very easily help her with that. But it's probably going to be easier in a conversation than going through a question answer. But I'd love for people to tell you what's been most valuable. So
I got one more question here, though. I've been a CNA for 30 years, but taking care of my mom for the past 3 years. It's been touch and go. What can I do to get over how I was treated as a child to young adult? So how do you take care of somebody who didn't take care of you, more or less, is what I'm reading.
I totally understand that. I can relate to that question significantly. And that is why I tell people our thoughts are so important. I'm a Christian and I'm very open about my faith. When my mom and dad put my sister and I in boarding school, I was 12. My sister was 10 years old. And for many, many years, I harbored resentment. I felt abandoned. I felt like my, especially when I had kids and I was, I saw how baby my 12-year-old was, which was the age I was when I went to boarding school. My sister and I competed for my parents' attention. We were, in essence, abandoned. We really were abandoned. Financially, always taken care of. My dad's a hard man. A lot of verbal abuse, never physical abuse, but very short with us. So I didn't have a stellar, life growing up. But what I did, the only thing I know for people to do is they have to, what I had to work through, and I worked through this for a very long time with the pastor. I had to get to a point where I was willing to forgive my parents for what they did. they made a lot of mistakes. I believe that my parents loved me. They love me, but they didn't necessarily know, my dad's not a believer, a good way of showing their love and affection towards us. So I had to come to the point where I was willing to forgive them, understanding and knowing from a Christian perspective. I haven't forgiven them because they haven't asked. Forgiveness is something you have to ask for, but I have to have a posture and a spirit of willingness to forgive. Once I was able to do that, I was able to let my resentment go. Having said that, Linda, for this person on the other end, I do not know what their particular situation is. I also believe, though, that if you cannot get to that point of letting that go, if there are true bad situations out there.
Yeah.
I was never abused. I was never molested by a parent. None of those kinds of things. If those are the situations and you are faced with being that primary caregiver, I believe it's okay for you to find an alternative situation, because you should not have to do that. And if that's the case, you need to talk to a social worker. You need to find a state attorney that can find a custodial caregiver for the person. We don't
Right.
abandon that person, but then
Yeah.
that person isn't the right person to be providing that care.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
If I could just say one thing, I had a woman call me one day and she said my mother was the best mother till I was 10 years old. And then my mother got in a car accident and she got addicted to opiates.
yep,
She said then she was the worst mother of all. And as soon as was old enough, I got out of the house. She said, fast forward 25 years later, my mother has Alzheimer's and I have to take care of her. And her mother was angry and she was angry and back and forth. And I was praying and anything I was suggesting wasn't working. And one morning I was like, God, please help me. And I called her up and I said, tell me about a really special time with your mom. And she said, when I used to come home from school, my mom used to brush my hair. And I said, and she still has long hair. I said, do you think you could go to your mom and say, Mom, no one ever brushed my hair the way you did. Can you brush my hair?
yeah,
And she said, you're pushing it, Linda. But now every afternoon at 4 o'clock, her mother brushes her hair and she goes, I get to be the child. She gets to be the mom.
yep,
And we're trying to forget about the other stuff.
yep, absolutely. I only have a few more slides and then we
Yeah,
have
go ahead.
time for questions. So dementia coaching is essential for easing caregiver stress. I hate to use the analogy, but it is the right analogy. Too many of us family caregivers, the problem with dementia and dementia caregiving is that when we first find out somebody has dementia, we're very adaptable. People are adaptable, and we change and we adapt and we change and we adapt, because typically it is a long journey. It's kind of like that frog that's put into cold water, right? And the heat is turned on. If you throw a frog into boiling hot water, it'll jump out. It knows the water's hot. It won't stay in that water. Caregiving is the exact same thing. When we get thrown into that crisis, like I was with my dad when he got sick, we were thrown into the crisis. I recognized very quickly I didn't like this and changed things. But now that we're in the long-term caregiving relationship, I'm more like that frog in the cold water that gets the heat gets turned up, and that frog doesn't jump out. It just continues to swim until it turns into the stressed and boiled frog on the other end. What I want people to recognize is taking action, because it is imperative that we change something. The problem is that we wait too long. Linda, you know this. I know this. Everybody knows this, but they don't know this. So I really want people to find some better support. But dementia coaching isn't for everybody. It's like a very specific key and a very specific lock. It is for the right person is somebody who is coachable, somebody who is proactive, somebody who wants to change things. When I start working with people, I have them look at after this journey. when we're done? What do I want to look like? What do I want my relationships to look like? So it's not for people who just want to complain. It's not for people who really do not want to implement changes. So I definitely, it's not a right fit for everybody, but I would love to speak to people. So I'm going to give people an invitation. If you, I have some limited spots on my calendar. If you need help, like the person who is really struggling, go to that website, thinkdifferentdementia.com/contact. Schedule a call with me. There's no cost. I will help you. I'll get you clear about what you have to do, give you the next steps, and give you some confident feeling for the future. And then yet again, your free caregiver scorecard for you as a family caregiver to figure out where you are in the boiled frog, for lack of a better word, range. Are you, still in the warm or the green zone, or are you really in the red zone? And we need to really do something next. And I'm pretty sure Linda will link all of these resources for you guys. I do want to challenge people to think about the future. Think about the future when you are done with this journey, because you as a family caregiver have your own life and relationships afterwards. Did you guys know that between 30 to 40% of family caregivers actually pass away before the person that they're taking care of? And when I was researching it for the Alzheimer's and dementia, it's hard to get an accurate number, but I've read between 18 to 41% of
Yeah.
people. So
Yeah.
I really want people to take action on some of the strategies we've talked about today, and reach back out to me. They can listen to my podcast. It's called Dementia Caregiving for Families. And then we can go to questions, but I just want to leave the URLs up for people
Yeah.
have questions if they'd like to reach out. So
Yeah, and actually that number has gone down in the past couple of years than when I first started doing that, doing this business. And I think it's because of education. And it's
absolutely.
because of people like you, and it's the conferences and
Yep.
webinars. And when I first started doing this, I had to educate them that they were caregivers before I could even help them.
Well, and here's I'm so glad you bring that out, Linda, because I cannot tell you, I did a professional conference last week, and a lot of people they don't even recognize that they're caregivers. I did two conferences. I did a professional conference where we talked about that, but I also did like a senior living, like at a senior action place. And I actually asked the group, and there were probably about 60 people in the group. And I could see who the caregivers were in the group. I'm like, how many of you guys in the group here are caregivers? And nobody put
I know.
I'm like, okay, well, you are a caregiver if you're helping somebody put their shoes,
Exactly.
if
One, two,
you're taking
three.
out the trash,
Right.
if you're calling to check on them, make sure they're okay, you're a caregiver.
Yeah.
If you're mowing the lawn, if you're helping with finances, or if you're driving somebody
Yeah.
to the doctor's office, too many
But
people.
years ago what Rosalind Carter said? She said,
Yeah.
either you have been a caregiver, you are a caregiver, you will be a caregiver, or someone will be taking care of you. So I always say it's an equal opportunity employer. We're
Yes,
all going to
it
get an
absolutely is.
opportunity.
We all are going to get an opportunity, but I hope people will at least consider coaching as an
Yeah.
alternative solution to their own particular problems
Yeah.
related to dementia caregiving. Another fact before we, close out, is that the Alzheimer's Association has actually looked at what successful requirements are for dementia caregivers. And
Mhm.
that is, it needs to be longitudinal support over an extended period of time, both social and psychological support, and education, psychoeducational support. And therapy does not fall into that. Doctors do not fall into
Right.
that. Um, one-on-one consulting can play a role for sure, but what they also found was having
Yeah.
community around them. So that's what I'm creating, a community of people who are all experiencing the same thing from a positive perspective
Yeah.
on a solution-oriented approach.
Yeah. Well, I wish we had more time to talk because I could just chat further, but we will chat further at another time. Thank you so much for being with us today. I so appreciate you.
You are welcome. This was fun.
Thanks. Oh, that was wonderful. Just really how you look at it, how you look at it. I remember one time a woman came into a support group and she said, Alzheimer's saved my life. No, saved my marriage. And I said, excuse me? And she said, my husband was always go, 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 go. Even if we were on vacation, you had to go every minute. She said, now, since he has Alzheimer's, he's like, hey, babe, what do you want to do? Said he got calmed down, he got happier, he got friendlier. So just look at the different ways you can look at it.